Hey everyone, it's me again. I'm Adriana Smallwood. I'm a registered dietitian in Newfoundland. I just did a fertility live Facebook event, so now I'm going to do a gluten-free kitchen tips talk. So if you're joining in live, please let me know if you have any questions. Give us a thumbs up if you like what we're talking about. If you're joining us today, make sure you check out celiac.ca for any extra information. There's definitely some great tips there on how to avoid cross-contamination in the kitchen. So you can watch this if you're the type of person who likes to see things, or if you like to have a little literature there, then you can always check celiac.ca. Hi, Melissa. So the main thing, this is basically, if you have a gluten-free household and there's no gluten in your house, then you're lucky. You don't have to worry about cross-contamination. But if you're in a household where there's people consuming gluten, then you need to be extra precautious when it comes to eating and preparing food. So the biggest thing that a lot of people tend not to think about is a toaster. So if you have celiac and you are in a household where there's definitely people consuming bread that has gluten in it, then you definitely need to have your own toaster. And if there's small children, or if you have like in-laws or your parents visiting regularly, or somebody staying in your house, or roommates, then you should invest in a toaster cover to keep over the toaster, and maybe just say like gluten-free only, just to make sure that nobody accidentally uses your toaster. The second thing that you should absolutely do is have a section of your counter where you're just preparing your gluten-free food. And if this isn't possible, then just make sure that you clean the counters well. Make sure there's no crumbs. Use a cleaner. Make sure there's no crumbs from anything that was cooked before. Or you could have your own cutting board that you just use to prepare things on, and make sure everything is cleaned off really well so that the surface that you're using isn't contaminated. The third thing that you definitely need to be aware of is condiments. So, mayo jars, peanut butter, almond butter, any of those nut butters, butter, anything that's in a container that people are scooping a knife in, or a fork or a spoon after buttering their own bread, you definitely need to have your own. So get your own peanut butter, get your own butter, get everything, get some labels, mark it all gluten-free. Perhaps you have a fridge that has extra crispers. Make a crisper gluten-free where you're keeping all of the things, all the condiments that you need, or invest in squirt bottles so that no one's double dipping, and that is definitely not an issue, so that there's no stress there whatsoever. The fourth thing you can do most people have a million cupboards in their kitchen, so make a cupboard that's designated specifically for your gluten-free flours. So make sure that everything is there, and you're not cross-contaminating with the regular flour. So make sure you're keeping that in a separate cupboard. That's really important. And the best thing you can do if you're working with a really small space is to always make the gluten-free food first, and then you're not worried about cross-contamination whatsoever. So if you're the type of person who likes to do your own baking, make sure you're baking your gluten-free things first, clean everything up, and then make your regular stuff. Now, make sure before you start your gluten-free cooking that everything is clean, but do that first so that there's no flour in the air, there's no flour on the surfaces that has gluten in it. If you're making a sandwich or toast or anything that has gluten, make sure you're preparing that first. So, make your gluten-free food always first, so that then the issue is never going to come about. If you're baking in the oven, that's usually not an issue, because unless food gets everywhere, that's not an issue. But I would suggest using your own baking things, because a lot of people don't get their muffin cookie trays, any of those trays, their bread trays, they don't get them clean enough. So I would suggest also using your own pots and pans when it comes to baking and cooking. The other thing that you do, if money is an issue, you can use both. When I'm out and I want to avoid cross-contamination, I'll line a tray with tin foil, and then I'll line the tray with parchment paper just to make sure that there's a couple of layers there between the pan after washing it thoroughly. And that's a good point too, when you're out visiting with other people and, you know, potlucks or anything like that. It's best to make sure, you know, maybe they have plastic utensils there. That's a great thing because that means they were never used before, or you can bring your own. I stopped being embarrassed, and you definitely shouldn't feel embarrassed to go anywhere and bring your own food, your own utensils, your own plates, your own cups. I do it quite frequently. And, you know, people start to understand and they start to take it a little bit more seriously when they see that you are so stressed about potentially getting ill that you're even taking your own food and your own plates and whatnot. So, you know, these are the major things. You want to make sure, also, lastly, that you have your own utensils. And by utensils, I mean the things that you're stirring your baked goods with, the things that you're stirring your, you know, your sauces with, your pasta with, anything like that, especially wooden utensils. It doesn't matter how clean you get those things, they absorb things so easily. So if you're using wooden utensils, you like the feel of them, make sure there's wooden utensils for your gluten things and there's wooden utensils for your for your gluten-free things. So make sure that there's 2 separate utensils at all times. You know, if you don't have space, again, maybe you can keep the things for gluten in a drawer, and then you can get a little container that you keep on the counter for your gluten-free utensils. Make sure everything is separated. I mean, there's all kinds of great containers Walmart has. At Walmart, the dollar store, they have really cheap containers that can help you organize your gluten-free things and, you know, label everything, especially if you're in a household where people might get confused. So we'll bring it all together. You want to make sure you have your own toaster, toaster oven. Keep your oven clean if, you know, you've had like an explosion or something like that, but there's no need to worry about the oven for any other reason. Make sure that you're using your own utensils for gluten-free, and utensils are baking spoons, stirring spoons, those types of things, the things that are touching the food, or pastas that aren't gluten-free. Make sure you have your own designated area for your gluten-free flours that are separate from your flours. So that just could be like a different cupboard next to the cupboard, and you know, you could keep it in the cupboard that has your glasses. You don't need to have a whole cupboard that's designated for gluten-free flours, just as long as it doesn't have the regular flour mixed in there too. In your fridge, you want to make sure that you have your own condiments that are all gluten-free if they have a screw top. If it's a squirt bottle, then you don't need to worry about it. But if it's a container with a lid that you have to dip a spoon, a fork, a knife in, make sure you have your own. Make sure you label it, or keep it in a crisper or its own area in the fridge and designate that the gluten-free area and make sure everybody knows. If you're out and about, you're going to a party, you're going to a potluck, you want to make sure that the things that are being cooked are gluten-free and avoiding cross-contamination. Make sure you clean the pan first. Put a nice layer of tin foil there and parchment paper, 2 layers to make sure everything is nice and clean. And use your own baking dishes for gluten-free things as opposed to the things that you're using to bake that have gluten in them. So that would be muffin pans, bread pans, cookie trays, the types of things that you might not clean very well. Because, I mean, if you've seen a muffin tray after years of use, then you see that it starts to turn black from the muffin stuff that we don't get off of it. And grease and everything goes through those muffin liners, so I wouldn't trust those. So I would have your own muffin tray or other baking trays. So if you want to take a look on the celiac website, www.celiac.ca, under the Living Free section and Newly Diagnosed, they have a section that talks about cross-contamination, and it goes over all of that in great detail and talks, because that is what we're doing right now. This kitchen skills, that's about avoiding cross-contamination at the end of the day. So take a look at that. If you find yourself getting sick and you've done everything that you possibly can to avoid cross-contamination and you don't think that you can do anything else, then meet with your registered dietitian. Like me, I can never emphasize that enough. I mean, I have new patients coming to me all the time. I have old patients coming to me all the time, and we always we always seem to be able to narrow down one place where they might be getting some sort of cross-contamination that they didn't think about before. So it's, even if you've been diagnosed 15 years, sometimes there's some new things. And, meet with your doctor if you haven't had a referral for a dietitian in a long time. And perhaps a follow-up session or a refresher session is something that you need. Or at the end of the day, you can check the celiac site because they have lots of great information on there. If you're looking for a new dietitian, you can go to dietitians.ca. They have a Find a Dietitian profile there, and you can look for a dietitian. It's all over Canada, so you can look for a dietitian in your area, and then it always states underneath what areas they specialize in. So you can find a dietitian that specializes in celiac, and that is the one that you want to meet with because there's a lot of information about celiac, and a dietitian that doesn't specifically deal with it might not be able to tell you all the tiny nitty-gritty things that are constantly changing on a daily basis. So make sure you're dealing with a dietitian that specializes in celiac. So this video is going to be on the site for here on out, so it's going to be recorded on there. For those of you who aren't listening live and who are going to be listening to this later, I'll be checking the comments section for the next 24 hours if you do have any specific questions that you wanted to ask. And like I said, if you want to go on the celiac website under newly diagnosed, they have all the information there about cross-contamination too. But I love questions. So for the next 24 hours, I'll definitely be checking to make sure that nobody has any questions. Thanks so much for tuning in. And thanks so much for joining the Celiac Association. There's lots of great knowledge there. Tune in frequently because we're always doing fun things like this, and we love to give everybody information. And if you have any ideas for things that we can do, I'm sure they'd love to hear it too. Take care, everybody, and have a great weekend. Bye.